Cold. So very cold. It had been cold for what had seemed like an eternity, and there was absolutely no chance of that fact changing any time soon, or ever for that matter. Some things just could not be reversed by any means, and this is one of them. Now she simply hovered in the black abyss that had once been a thriving universe. Cold. So very cold. The slightly rambling mantra that had been repeated for millennia on end, never ceasing for even a moment. Somewhere, deep in her mind, she remarked that maybe if she stopped mumbling that little repetitive ditty of her words, that she would probably go completely insane, as opposed to slightly. Maybe, somewhere hidden inside that brain of hers, there was a semblance of a pony that had once existed, the proud alicorn and co-ruler of a prosperous nation known as Equestria. It had been a truly great time. She had been seated in the highest spot of power on the planet. That was to be expected, of course. One does not simply see two alicorns that control the very cycle of the days by themselves, and not put them in power. She had even been worshipped as a god at one point, despite her refusal to accept the sacrifices of all things. But the people of the planet of Equus did not know how just true that they were with their assumptions. She and her sister had existed for far longer than any of them could have fathomed. The first thing the pony once known as Luna could remember was a bright orb of light. That had been the first time that she had seen what was to become her sister and her most truly trusted companion. In that era the universe had been a wild and violent place, still calming slightly from the rough forces of the archaic and primeval birth of the universe that had happened billions of years earlier. She couldn't remember being truly conscious at that time, as if everything prior to that moment was just a fuzzy dream. She could almost make out memories from it, memories of bright light and happiness, but it was like trying to catch water in a sieve. She had simply moved about, glowing wings of energy that could span galaxies lazily propelling her through the abyss. And then the first true memory. It was of a bright light, one of the many nuclear furnaces that had fueled the growing might of the universe. A sun. It seemed different from the others, however. She could actually see something inside of it. It was incredibly difficult to make out, and just how long it had been there was unclear. But there was a shape inside. A thought had drifted through Luna's head at the time, a murmur that said Celestia, but it was tiny and easily forgotten. Luna had drifted inside the sun, ignoring the scorching heat that threatened to eat her completely, and touched the figure. It looked almost identical to herself, but a pure white. Of course, at the time, she had been unknowing of such things like color, but she had had a long time to figure those things out for her. So she touched the figure, and it suddenly moved, its eyes snapping open. Luna had watched it curiously, something inside her flickering, a knowledge that this other being would be part of her existence for a long time to come. She dragged the white pony out of the enormous ball of fire, beating her huge ephemeral wings, huge glowing waving things that spanned millions times her own body length, comprised of shimmering rays, and propelled herself and her new charge out of the heart of the star. Millions of years soon passed in a blink of an eye. She and her sibling had stayed at each other's side throughout almost every single one. To have such a thing as company was a welcome change. Luna had tried to communicate at some point, but with the lack of the simple things like a medium to transmit sound, words were out. Regardless, they shared in the knowledge that there was someone by their side. Even so, the idea of communication burned at Luna. She wanted so desperately to share the ideas that boiled in her mind. And thus came magic. The discovery that she could use her horn to alter the very fabric of the universe itself was startling, and knew suddenly she was moving through in power to completely eradicate a whole solar system in just a blink of an eye. while the next moment she could be crafting a spell that would delve into the far reaches of the mind with utmost delicacy. And then a true relationship between herself and her sister had formed. They hadn't stopped there, no. Luna had imparted the knowledge of the ability to change the universe to her sister, and together they had put events in motion. Together they found the rubble of smashed planets and ruined asteroids, a tedious thing that took many years, and started to crush it together, harder and harder until it struck. Now, they were on a barren planet with nary a single unique thing in sight, and so Luna had started experimenting with changing other things. She had grasped the very building blocks of the universe and started altering them. Small things at first, but gradually bigger. Instead of just using forces and changing things that already existed, she was making things that she had never seen before. Soon the planet was full of color, and water, and unique landforms. Someone could possibly liken them to an art project of some sort. After all, to a pony, what with a single sweep of their horn could send an entire planet into oblivion. What would a single lesser pony look like? Would they even show up anything different from a lump of rock? Were they nothing else than a project to be worked on? But Luna hadn't stopped there. The thought had rooted itself in her and her sister's mind, and maybe there could be others. Other beings like them. After all, having only two sentient things in this entire universe could get rather boring. She started by forming strange and wondrous things. Ideas for creatures came spilling out of her head, and she made them a reality. She used the universe to make them, and used the power inside her to impart life, and they went off into her plan. She then had the idea to make them look like her, just so that maybe she and her sister would truly have company. So Luna had started changing the other things. She had taken clay and made it solid, whilst also giving it form. She had taken the power that she had found in the huge collisions of planets and asteroids, and imparted that into the clay. Thus, the first Earth pony came into life, heavy and sturdy, with all the raw force they could ever need. Then she had taken these streams of mellifluous energy that streamed through galaxies, and shaped the energy and made it come alive. And so the first Pegasus was made, light as a feather, quick and could be. And then she had taken the stuff of stars, made it solid, and gave it form. From this the first unicorn was made, a creature of magic that was irrevocably linked to the powers of the universe in more ways than one. Each one had a portion of power, but they were not as Luna and Celestial were. Luna had tried to combine them many a time, but to no use. No matter how many times she tried, no matter each unique combination of both wings and horn, while also having the raw power to create and unmake in an instant. But she hadn't stopped there. She had made many, many more of these new creatures. At first they didn't think, but very soon the first idea came, and these creatures would do things that she hadn't expected. They lived. It wasn't simple interactions and crafting like she and her sister had partaken in, but true culture. Some creatures ventured far into the north and started to change, mirroring the cold climate that they had to endure. Some went east, their coats changing, along with the basic language. Some stayed where they were, and they settled. Long before this sort of evolution had come to pass, however, death had come into the universe. These creatures would not last forever, and would soon crumble and turn into dust. Luna and her sister had been filled with an indescribable sadness, but there was nothing that they could do to change that fact. And yet, even armed with the knowledge of their mistakes, they still couldn't make lasting creatures. At the same time they had created life, they had created death. But the world did not care for such weaknesses like death. Minuscule creatures living their lives would not alter it. So the world had continued spinning, and had fallen into orbit around the sun. The creatures had adapted, and life had continued. The shape of the world also started to change. Miniature furnace of the heart of the stony ball was keeping the system in a constant state of flux, causing land masses to rise high into the sky. At other points, they were as if a knife had been sliced through its skin. The basis for existence had stayed unchanged for years. The creatures now called themselves ponies were starting to learn. Things like farming, the wheel, the written word were now in their lives. The sisters also changed, turning from baser beings into learned creatures, enlightened by the collective knowledge of the entire species. It was only understandable that upon realizing just what the sisters were that the ponies started to worship them, claiming that they were higher beings. That was true to an extent, but they were not all-knowing as the ponies claimed. They were just as naive and fickle as anyone. And they hadn't been alone in the universe. Soon other things arrived. These others had drifted from the eternal space for millennia uncounted, searching for something. What exactly, they do not know, but they had the urge to seek. The first of these was Discord. He saw the planet and the delicate system that was in place and was amused. Years passed and the amusement turned into boredom and the need for something to change. He had seen the universe at large and knew just how constant the state of flux was, and he wanted that back. However, the sisters were not about to let the creation, their treasured ponies, be uprooted and irrevocably changed by the unfeeling beast, and so it came to pass that they used their powers to trap Discord in a prison made entirely of stone. And they realized something. Their powers, the ability to alter the universe as they saw fit. What if they were to become as Discord was? If one of them wanted to tear over the planet apart, destroying life in the process, they couldn't have that happen, ever. So they had uprooted their powers, placing them in vessels that had been crafted with the utmost care for the purpose of storing the forces that could change a universe. Only a creature of pure heart and mind would be able to access the tools, and only then for certain uses. To create and prosper, never destroy. Soon after, more beings came to the planet. Some stayed, and some did not. They were all curious. The ones that stayed adapted to their new purposes. Some would watch over the ponies, using their powers to guide and care for them. Some grew hungry for the admiration of the lesser creatures, and bent them to their wills. For such occasions, the sisters would harness the power stored into the gems, and use them to vanquish the evils. One evil had not been stopped quickly enough. It had slipped into Luna's mind, and changed it, driving her mad. Her sister had been forced to unleash her own powers against her to stop her. 1,000 years had passed, but the world had changed as if it had been a million. Suddenly, she no longer recognized the ponies, and barely her own sister. Luna had tried her utmost to reconnect to her own creations, and with her beloved sister, the only companion for her life. She had failed, and slowly, as generations passed, she left to roam the world. Taking the form of a lesser pony, she would commute and simply observe, no longer taking part in the system she had created with her own mind. More time passed, and she noted that there were lessening amounts of the ponies. Then there was none. The world was silent. She had known that the world was truly dying. The sun above her head, the same one that she had found her sister in, the same one that had been burning for billions of years, with the aid of her powers, was dying. The heat had risen dramatically, and its size was rapidly increasing. Luna had searched for her sister desperately, trying to find her in the ruins of society that died thousands of years ago, but which she had missed in a blink of an eye. Where there was once proud buildings was now a desolate desert, imprints of the ground that might have been bone. The seas were drying up, more time passing, even as she roamed the earth. In a final, desperate attempt, she looked up. She could see a figure in the heart of the sun. Luna knew that it was her sister, and so spread her wings, a blue glow that had been unused since her first nascent thought. The result of her first beat, her wings, many times the size of the planet, shattered the rocky globe in a million pieces. The second, turning them into dust. The third, dispersing all the evidence of the once prosperous civilization into oblivion. Such fickle things no longer mattered. She had found her sister. Her sister would live on with her. Except she didn't. Luna had beat her wings furiously, accelerating to merely a string of light, deforming space and time as she stretched a hoof towards her target. Her sister merely hovered inside the sun, her own hoof outstretched as if reaching towards Luna. Celestia looked so old, so very old. Wrinkles deformed every spare space on her body. She had looked into her eyes. Her eyes spoke of regret, and love, and sadness, and acceptance. Luna had stretched and blurred into nothing, her own hoof almost touching the surface of the sun, body outstretched. Wings flared into huge blue wing-shaped streaks that reached from one side of the galaxy to the other. When her sister closed her eyes for the last time, a single tear dripping down her muzzle. And then she exploded. The resulting detonation had blown Luna far away, but she made no effort to slow herself. She knew instinctively that her sister was gone. She had seen, nay, felt as if all the particles that comprised her only true companion in life were now dispersed on the solar winds. Even the powers that had been locked away were broken free as half of the total powers, as well as the enchantments keeping them in place, were destroyed. Luna flew. She beat her wings as hard as she could just to get away from all the evidence of what had happened. The universe changed as millions of years ticked away like the sands in an hourglass. Soon Luna found that she was having to wait longer and longer to pass each star, and that the universe was becoming more and more cold. She was starting to have trouble using her magic to manipulate the state of existence, as it was becoming so stretched out and thin that there wasn't really that much to manipulate anymore. Then the light started to fade as each sun, one by one, winked out in the depressing explosion that accomplished nothing. There was no longer enough pressure to create more suns, and the nebulae that had once made spectacular displays in the sky had long since dispersed into nothingness. The fires of the universe were dying. Eventually, inevitably, the last sun had gone out, and Luna was truly alone. More time had passed, or maybe none. There was little else to tell the ticking of the imaginary clock by other than the temperature and the energy of the universe. It seemed that even the top intellectuals had been wrong about energy, because there sure seemed to be a lot less of it now. Or maybe it was still there, but had disappeared into the far reaches of the unknown. Cold. So very cold. How long had it been since she had last said that? Probably not long. It was never long before she found herself repeating those words. Oh, so it's getting closer now. It was only getting colder, and she actually could feel the energy of the universe stopping as each particle began to cease its eternal vibration. The vacuum around her grew still, as even the rays that had been always beating upon her shiny coat came to a standstill. Slowly, ever so slowly, it only grew colder, and the universe became more and more dead to her. And then it stopped altogether, and nothing happened. Luna wasn't sure what to expect anymore. The universe, in the very sense of the term, was dead. There was nothing, no movement at all. She simply hovered in it. Nothing. That's what she was feeling right now. All the feelings that she could have felt had long since exhausted themselves. She was as old as the universe, and now she was older. Maybe this could account for her birthday. Well, what to do now? Nothing. There was literally nothing. There was no evidence of life having ever existed, or that it ever will. She was alone in the husk of nothing. The universe had just grown so big that there was eventually nothing left. Something she remembered. She remembered the lives of countless ponies, and the other beings that had traversed the void with her. She remembered living, and learning, and creating, crafting the universe with. She remembered her sister, whom she had never truly forgotten. The being that she had met in the early stages of the universe had lived alongside her for almost all the rest. She wanted her back. A single tear dripped down Luna's face as it glowed as it slowly fell. Filled with the love that Luna held for life itself, the desire to create, the love that she had held for her sister, the longing that she felt for the warm caresses of her only true companion. The tear reached her muzzle and trickled down her neck, following her body until it reached her heart. It instantly disappeared, and an enormous surge of glowing power shot down Luna's wings, which grew to an unfathomable size. And then they pulsed, releasing all the energy needed to create a new universe. The single pulse collided upon itself, and from that collision exploded forth creation. Then, 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 events passed, and the universe was a wild and violent place, still calming slightly from the rough forces of the archaic and primeval birth of the universe that happened billions of years ago. She wasn't truly conscious. It was as if it was just a fuzzy dream. She could almost make out the memories of bright light and happiness, but it was like trying to catch water with a sieve. She simply moved about, glowing wings of energy that could span galaxies lazily propelling her through the abyss. And then, the first true thought. There, a bright light, one of the many nuclear furnaces that fueled the glowing might of the universe. It seemed different from the others, however. She could actually see something inside it. It was incredibly difficult to make out, and just how long it had been there had been unclear, but there was a shape inside it. A thought that drifted through Luna's head at that very moment. A murmur that said Celestia, but it was tiny and easily forgotten. Luna drifted inside it, ignoring the scorching heat that threatened to eat her completely, and touched the figure. It looked almost identical to herself, but a pure white, of course. At the time she had been unknowing of such things like color, but she had a long time to figure those things out afterwards. So she touched the figure, and suddenly it moved, its eyes snapping open. Luna had watched it curiously, something inside her flickering, a knowledge that this other being would be part of her existence for a long time to come. It looked back into her eyes, its mouth slowly curving into a smile. Sister, it's been a long time. I've missed you.